Do you know why I wanted to stay so much? I wanted to be here again.
You've been here before?
Yes, I've been here before. The spirit of the place still resonates and returns to inspire me.
Years have passed. What would they see today? The hills and valleys are the same. Gone are the forests since the enclosures came. Hedgerows have sprung, the land is under plough, and orchards bloom with blossom on the bough. Sussex and Kent are like a garden fair, but sheep still graze upon the ridges there. The pilgrim's way still winds above the weald, through wood and brake and many a fertile field. But though so little's changed since Chaucer's day, another kind of pilgrim walks the way.
And I ask myself, where on the map are the deep rutty tracks, the names of fields, the trees that once offered me shade? My maps record a single journey that brought me here.
So you like gardens in the country?
Alas, when on our pilgrimage we wend, we modern pilgrims see no journey's end. Gone are the ring of hooves, the creak of wheel. Down in the valley runs our road of steel. No genial host at sinking of the sun welcomes us in. Our journey's just begun.
And I ask myself, how does my presence alter the landscape?
That stone interest you? It comes from the old road.
Yes, I've seen it.
The pastures of the wilderness run over, and the hills are girded with joy. The meadows are clothed with sheep, and the valleys stand so thick with corn, that they shall laugh and sing.
You look as though you belong around here already.
Do I?
Sure do. I thought I'd stick around today myself.
Ah, so you're interested in that old road, are you?
Yes, sir, I'm crazy about that old road.
Ah, them was the days for a wheelwright.
And I ask myself, how many feet have trudged upon this track, that I should now add to theirs my footprint in passing.
Nice piece of weatherboarding, that watermill. I must ask the old gentleman who built it. I'll bet it was a Horton.
How did you manage to get round Mr. Horton in that way? I believe you are a detective.
We speak the same language.
The same language of line and colour, form and content.
I'm English and I don't speak their language.
It is not a language of words.
He knows about wood, see, and so do I.
That's it.
That was it.
That was it.
Oh, look at that house. What a perfect place. I wonder whose it is. What it's like at the back. Whoa! What wouldn't I give to grow old in a place like that? Beats me. Last night I could have believed anything. But this morning, if ever a man looked right, he did.
Yeah, it don't add up.
Whoa!
But you know some things don't add up in life. Time marches on. Which way does your road go?
I hope up that hill.
Why that hill?
Along that ridge runs the South Downs Way.
You've seen it?
I've walked it. I've seen the bluebells in the spring and the wild thyme, the broom and the heather.
Why should people who love the country have to live in big cities?
So you like gardens in the country?
Ah, you was well brought up.
Whoa.
Not heaven itself, upon the past, it has power. But what has been, and I have had my hour.
May I ask why you want to lecture us at all, sir? Well, you see, it's a form of human weakness. It's only human nature when you hear something interesting to want to pass it on to somebody else. Well, I know a lot of interesting things about this part of the country. I feel the urge to pass some of them on to you. I don't know what you are in civil life. You might be cook,
Poet,
clerk,
painter,
doctor, lawyer, merchant.
filmmaker.
Let me remind you that as much as 600 years ago, doctors and lawyers, clerks and merchants were passing through here on the old road.
And I remind myself that I'm walking in my own footsteps, along a wayward track beneath the downs, after more than 30 years. But among so much change, this path has remained a constant.
Well, what have we got to do with this old road and the people who travelled along it 600 years ago?
Yeah. Isn't the house you were born in the most interesting house in the world for you? But you want to know how your father lived? And his father?
My father fossicking in a rock pool, panning for pebbles in a shallow scoop of water. And I ask myself, is this what DNA is like? A random selection from the gene pool of what might one day effect change in the future landscape's physical form. Yet here I'm not yet born, but somewhere I'm already present, whether my parents had conceived of my being or not.
That's all right, but how do we know it really happened?
It happened.
Well, there are more ways than one of getting close to your ancestors. Follow the old road, and as you walk, think of them and of the old England. And when you see the bluebells in the spring and the wild thyme and the broom and the heather, you're only seeing what their eyes saw. You ford the same rivers, same birds are singing. When you lie flat on your back and rest, and watch the clouds sailing, as I often do, you're so close to those other pilgrims that you can hear the thrumming of the hoofs of their horses, and the sound of the wheels on the road, and their laughter and talk, and the music of the instruments they carried. And when I turn the bend of the road, I feel I've only to turn my head to see them on the road behind me.
I see you here, in me, and the legacy you left.
Seem to be busy from morning till night.
Away with hands that makes from raw materials some construction,
That's how my dad taught me.
on which to shelve the volumes of all our missing years.
You put a great deal in to get very little out.
Do I follow in your wake,
Step by step.
in the weald or upon the ridge?
It's only a day's walk.
But a lifetime of experience.
What, 50 miles? Some walk.
The distance is not measurable in miles.
How do you like walking? Do you like walking?
I like walking, but it is more than that.
The answer's in yourself. Follow the old road, and as you walk,
As I walk with the company of the imagined. They are forever walking.
think of them and of the old England.
I hear them whispering through the trees. Their voices carried on the breeze through every vale and village. Wherever I go, they have been. I feel their presence along each green lane. I follow their tracks and read their passing like a lost language.
Glorious, isn't it?
And I ask myself, where in these meadows is my voice?
Is anybody there?
And how to articulate that voice in a language not of words.
It's a real voice you heard. You're not dreaming.
You know, just now I heard sounds.
What sounds did you hear?
I felt my heart beating, and I heard the earth exhale.
Horses' hooves, voices, and a lute. Or an instrument like a lute. Did you hear anything?
Those sounds come from inside, not outside. They're only when you're concentrating, when you believe strongly in something. Just now I was concentrating on who was coming up the hill to disturb me.
Disturb you at what?
Breathing the air, smelling the earth, and watching the clouds. Why don't you sit down?
Do you know why I wanted to stay so much? I wanted to be here again.
Yes, sir, I was born with an open mind. But it sure is a surprise to me to find how much I like everything over here.
It is a question of belonging and of the culture I have inherited.
Why do you, from sunrise to sunset, and at odd hours throughout the night, have to drink tea?
I shouldn't be too noisy about it if I were you.
But I hate the stuff.
If anybody'd made me walk 3 miles before the war, and then climb a hill, I'd say he could bury me at the top.
Drawback is that the people may get used to looking at the world from a sitting position.
Boy, cast your eye around that noble prospect. Wasn't it worth the climb?
It was worth the climb.
Of course, I freely admit it's nothing to compare with the view from Three Sisters Mountain.
It was worth the climb to reach the undulating chalk of the Seven Sisters,
You sure are a whole mess of sisters ahead of me.
that sharp edge of the English coastline, where the land terminates abruptly and confronts the sea.
Now, don't start to tell me that you've got higher hills and broader rivers.
I don't see any river.
There.
Today I shall ford that river and cross the Weald towards the North Downs, and eventually
I am happy.
home.
I feel fine. Maybe I was homesick. Now, for the first time, I feel swell.
As evening descends, I search for a quiet corner in which to pitch my tent. I wait for evening and rise again with the dawn.
You don't fancy the countryside much, do you?
To tell the truth, I'd hardly realized there was a countryside before the war.
You see those clouds forming? It'll be a warm day tomorrow.
Well, the thing I most loved about your film is the way that the different elements are blended seamlessly into the whole. So you go from a picture of someone in the Canterbury Tale on an upland to you on what looks like the same upland, reacting in, well, a different way, because a very personal way, but both of you expressing a sort of ecstasy about the fabric of England, basically, which is something I love to see. So anyway, the film is, I find, very touching, because it touches on all the right chords about being English and living in England and loving the English landscape and so on. And it also reminds one what an extraordinary film A Canterbury Tale is. I mean, how it's, as well as having all the right attitudes, it's, which is curious, since obviously it was written by an emigre, by Emeric Pressburger, but I think he gets all the pleasures and some of the perils of Englishness right in this film, and as well as being visually beautiful.
Well, perhaps because Pressburger was an emigre, that he was able to view England and Englishness with a detached attitude, and therefore was more attuned to those particular qualities that a person from England might overlook. As Kipling once wrote, "And what should they know of England who only England know?" Having lived abroad for the best part of 15 years, I feel that when I return to southern England, my intuition homes in on a sense of Englishness and resonates with those particular qualities that are characteristic of this region, about which I mostly identify.
I know you're very interested in the neo-romantic painters of Britain, but I wonder what sort of influence do you think they've had on you, and what are their legacy in general, if any?
Well, certainly the neo-romantic painters have been a tremendous inspiration, but their predecessors too, like Paul Nash and Graham Sutherland. There is a quote from the Book of Psalms carved on a stone on the wall of the church in Surrey in Sussex, which I use in the film. This text reads for me like a poem by William Blake, but as a manifesto for Samuel Palmer. However, it was the exhibition of the British neo-romantic painters in 1987 that opened my eyes to a previously unknown group of artists who focused their gaze on an English sensibility. And one painting in particular had a profound effect on me. This was a work by John Craxton entitled Harvest and Bird. When I saw this painting for the first time, I was quite overwhelmed. Given the size and simplicity of the painting, for me this is all the more astonishing. It is a mere 18 by 26 centimetres, and it shows a man in a cornfield with a startled bird. The harvester is a man of the earth. He's primordial. Bird in its startled behaviour suggests a kind of unease in the landscape, a threatening atmosphere which is echoed in the form of the trees and the dark, brooding sky. Through this picture, I discovered a new way to interpret the landscape and connect with the primordial sense of my own ancestry.
In the film, you've edited your own footage very neatly, on the whole, into scenes from A Canterbury Tale, the Powell Pressburger film, and I wondered why.
This film is a favourite of mine. When I first saw it around 1990, it was the first time that I could identify with the attitudes of all the main characters of any film, each of whom had a very different view of the countryside, even with the protagonist, Thomas Culpeper, when he states,
"It's only human nature when you hear something interesting to want to pass it on to somebody else."
and later when he says, "Don't you want to know how your father lived, and his father?" There are so many wonderful lines in this film that resonate with me. Each character, in their own way, articulated issues that have been and still are an interest of mine, where you fit into the landscape. and what kind of impact your presence can have. Whether you are actually aware of it or not, at some point that realization reaches you, as was the case with the main characters in this film. My concern is that sense of belonging and finding your place in the landscape, and how much your cultural heritage helps root you to that location.
What is the Sydney footage that you used, as well as the stuff which is obvious from the Canterbury Tales?
My father is a largely unknown figure to me. He started filming with a cine camera before I was born, but continued for several years afterwards. I've used some scenes featuring family members, and later some of me making something in the garden, trying to emulate my father's carpentry skills.
Your father figures a bit, not very much, in the footage. What was your relation with your father?
In all the surviving cine film in my possession, my father appears just a couple of short clips. It is the only footage I have of him. My great regret is that I don't have a single audio recording of his voice. He was not a great physical presence in my life, but my memories of him have left an indelible impression. I'm still discovering the legacy he left in me.
For me, the film is intensely nostalgic. I wonder, was it for you a film about nostalgia?
I identify mostly with the southern English landscape, and living abroad as I do, I often have a great yearning to visit the downland. But nostalgia is not a feature of this film, as the character Sergeant Bob Johnson states when he reads those lines by John Dryden. And what has been, and I have had my hour. I'm not interested in looking back, but I am interested in my own search for that particular sense of belonging in a landscape that was my primary source of inspiration. That quality that imbued my paintings from some 30-odd years ago with what I considered to be an almost mystical sense of place, that rooted those works to that part of the country where they were painted. In making this film, I've been trying to rediscover myself through those paintings and reconnect with that source of inspiration.
You seem to have a particular affinity with the South Downs. Why that part of England?
Yes, my affinity with the landscape is primarily associated with southern England, more particularly with the chalk downland, the North and South Downs, and the Weald. I like the gentleness of the form of the landscape, the soft chalk and the undulating hills and combes. And I find that the colours of the landscape there, with their chalky hue, root them to that particular corner of England.
But I'm also impressed, as I say, with your agility in incorporating all sorts of different materials and playing with soundtrack with or against the visuals and all of that. I mean, you are obviously, dare I tell you, grovelingly of course, that you are a very talented filmmaker.